Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video I'm going to talk about 3 benefits for children in child custody situations. So many times I think it's easy for us to really see the negatives, the negative impact on our kids in child custody situations, especially when we're dealing with a high conflict ex. So I think that we tend to get really focused there, and a lot of times we don't really think about some of the benefits. So I'm going to give you 3 benefits in this video that I think will help you kind of reframe what's happening to your children in this situation. Before we dive into that, let me just remind you, if you like these videos, don't forget to hit like and also subscribe to the channel so you get notified as new videos are released each week. One of the things that I can tell you is, for me, my kids were 11 and 15 at the time of my divorce. And so, my kids had already been, raised in the home with me and their dad for, at least a large portion of their childhood by that point. My older son, almost his entire childhood, because he was 15. And then Thomas's kids were 1 and 2 when he and I got together. And so I was able to kind of really witness firsthand, all the boys are now 18, 19, 28, and 32. So this has been sort of a 17-year study, a 17-year perspective on, what this looks like for kids. And my children were with me the vast majority of their time. Didn't see their dad a whole lot, 5 to 10%, because he was off doing other things, not because I stopped him from seeing them, but because that was his choice of how often he showed up. But Thomas's ex-wife, we have had 50-50 custody with her the entire time. And so I've been able to witness this situation where you have 2 really young kids who really have no memory of their parents having been together and having this equal parenting time where they go back and forth. And I know when children are little, that can be really tough for parents. And I think for moms in particular, we tend to be a little more, hands-on at those very tiny ages. And it can be hard when you've been used to having kind of this little body attached to you 24/7 pretty much. And all of a sudden they're gone half the time. That's a big transition to make for you and for the child. And so a lot of times we're kind of focused on the negatives of that, and, oh, what's the impact going to be, and how's this going to hurt the child, and how it makes me feel, and all those kinds of things. And I'm sure it was a struggle for Thomas's ex-wife in certain ways, because the boys were very young. They were 1 and 2. But witnessing this over the years and observing particularly the differences between certain skills that Thomas's children developed that mine didn't necessarily. Not that mine couldn't have in different circumstances. It's just that, my parenting style, I guess, didn't develop certain things. And I don't think that Thomas and his ex-wife's parenting style would have necessarily developed these characteristics in the boys either. It's just a byproduct of the fact that they had divorced parents. Let's talk about the 3 benefits. The first one, I think, is modeling. Okay. Like, do you really believe what you say you believe? So for both of the kids, I think sometimes we worry, and I sort of interrupted my own thought here, but sometimes we worry that things the other parent says about us during their parenting time or whatever is going to negatively impact the children's opinion of us. So like with the boys, I think there were times that Thomas worried, like, oh, is the things that his ex-wife and her new husband were doing on their end, causing the boys to view us negatively, or, and I don't think his ex-wife was really overt about saying negative things about us. She would just say and do certain things that would cause the kids, she would say things like, well, your dad won't let you do that, or things like that would cause the kids to come back and say, well, why can't we do this thing? Mom said that you said we can't, and it sort of puts you in a parent as in a bind of like being the bad guy, right, in this situation. But as time goes on and you're sticking to your truth, and you are showing your character by continually following through and being consistent on what you say you're going to do, then you model that behavior for your children. And children are very smart. And they get to the age, especially after they, start to get that 16, 17, 18-year range, they start to figure out, this parent always said this thing to me, but that doesn't match that parent's actions. And this parent always said this thing to me, and that totally matches their actions. And so they learn what that kind of character looks like. And the reason that I think this is important is because if you do have an ex that's high conflict or difficult, and I know vast majority of the people I talk to, that's the situation that you're in, obviously, because that's kind of what I specialize in. So it makes sense that's who I'm talking to. But what happens is your children actually get that contrasting view. If you're conducting yourself with integrity and with good morals and values and all those things, and your ex is a high conflict, narcissistic person or sociopath or somebody that's willing to lie, cheat, steal, whatever, to accomplish what they have to accomplish, your children are getting the benefit of the contrast of those two models for their life. They will start to see the perils of living that sort of manipulative, dishonest type of life. And they will start to see the value in conducting themselves with integrity and with good character. And so almost in a household where my kids had the family intact, I think in a lot of ways, I would say my ex-husband and I have these two contrasting ways of moving through the world. I don't lie, I don't cheat, I don't steal, I don't take advantage of others, I don't manipulate, at least I consciously try not to. I try to not, be manipulative for my own benefit and all those types of things. And I mean, I've been divorced a long time and my ex-husband may be a different person now, but when we were younger, if he could get away with something or, he could get a benefit out of manipulating another person or whatever, he would do it. And so in a way, my children kind of learned a molded together version of this. And I think my older son especially kind of has dynamics of both pieces sort of mixed together because he wasn't really given that contrast. And then, what happens is then they get older and they have more to work through and they have to figure it out or whatever, right? And so, but with Thomas's kids, they've sort of had the benefit of seeing that really early on and not having to wait until they make certain choices or whatever and go, oh, that wasn't good. I probably shouldn't have followed that path. I probably should have gone the other way that I knew. They sort of already see the consequences, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, of those types of choices real early on because they have had two separate households with a lot of contrast between the way that those two households function. That's benefit number one. I think the second big benefit that I see is that it fostered a lot of independence in Thomas's children. So you see them when they start to get about, 6, 7, 8, they start thinking about the fact that, oh, the math book is here and I'm going to need it at mom's and to do my homework over the weekend. So I better take that with me. Or, we're going to this special event and I'm going to need a tie. And the only household I have a tie in is this one. Or I'm going to go surfing with my friends and my surfboard's here. So I need to make sure that at transition, I take that with me. And so, and I'm not saying they were perfect every time. They certainly weren't. We had many times of running the math book over or running the surfboard over or whatever it is. But I think it fostered that sort of thought process much earlier because nobody was doing that for them. They had the responsibility of getting the things to the other parents and back, that they wanted. And sometimes as they got older, they would say to me, well, can we take this shirt or this pair of shoes or whatever? And my answer was always, you can take whatever you want, but if it, doesn't come back, don't expect me to go get it. Like you've got to take responsibility for making sure that comes back into the house if you want to be able to have it here to wear next week. I'm not going to go back over to mom's and get that for you or whatever. And so the situation in general just enabled us to foster a level of independence that I think most kids don't if their parents aren't divorced or separated or whatever, or not together, they don't really have to think about that, right? They live in one house, both parents, everybody's there, all their stuff is there all the time, and they don't really have to give that kind of forethought. And so I think that most kids don't start learning those things until they're a little bit older teenagers and they start having jobs or driving or doing other things like that. So I think it fostered a certain level of independence very early on, which was good. The third thing I think, and I think this is a real important one, this might be the most important one of all, is it fostered a certain amount of emotional security for them. And by that, I mean their ability to rely on their parents, like knowing that I can count on you. And, you've heard me and Thomas say that like he and his ex had high conflict early on, and he at that point didn't feel like she was the most stable person in the world for the kids. But in a way, I think it improved the kids' ability to rely on her because they know, well, and Thomas, but they know that every time they go back and forth, their stuff's there. So in mom's world and in our world, their bedrooms are here. All their stuff is in there. They go to the other parents. They're there for a week. They come back. Everything's still there the way they left it. They leave. They got to the point where they'd come back every 2 weeks, and they started doing that. As they got older, it lasted longer. Well, guess what? They come back. Stuff's still there. We're still here. They call us in between. They need something. If it's something reasonable that we can do, sure, we do that. Or sometimes Thomas would go and pick the boys up on mom's weekend, and they'd go surf for a few hours, and then he'd take them back to mom's or whatever. So just learning that, everything is still there, that parent is still there. They can still be counted on. They can still be relied upon, even though I'm away from them and I'm not right with them all the time. I can still count on them. I can count on all my things being there, and I can count on my home still being there that I live in. And I think that just created a certain amount of emotional security in the world in general for them, that enables them to have a higher level of confidence and self-esteem and make them feel more grounded, than they normally, I think, would have. Because, let's face it, I mean, we live in a house or whatever, but that changes, right? We move. Sometimes you have to move and live different places, and you change jobs and you change all kinds of things. Life is about constant change. I think that even though the children were having to go through this change of shifting back and forth between the houses all the time, and they were enduring that constantly, the stability that we were able to create in each home, and them knowing that they were coming back and that parent was still there and their things were still there, created a certain amount of that stability and continuity for them that they so desperately needed. And I think that fostered a lot of emotional security for them. I hope this makes you feel better about the fact that maybe you aren't with the other parent. We tend to really look at the negatives, and there are positives. So let's try to view it from that point of view. If you'd like to learn more about my coaching services, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. I'd love to chat with you and learn more about how I might be able to help you in this process. See you guys soon.